Welcome to Quarterly Review, a new podcast series which is a market update basically for the Costa del Sol real estate sector. And it's going to be, as the name suggests, once a quarter where I'll be reviewing what's happened and what we think is going to happen. But rather than it be just my opinion on things, I'm going to be bringing in a whole bunch of guests, people, stakeholders within the industry, from property portals to agents that maybe specialize in certain markets. In this episode, there's two overarching storylines. The big one, current one at least, is the potential effect on the Marbella and Costa del Sol real estate market because of what's happening in the Middle East. We're going to try offer a little bit of a informed view on that. And then there's a big revelation piece of news that has just come out from to do with the agent registration in Andalucía. There's something that came into effect in January, but they have 2 years to implement it, and something has come up. So stay tuned for that bit. We have Álvaro, the president of the LPA, coming in to talk about that. And I just will say in advance, Álvaro, when this news came out in Christmas about this registration thing, you were right. And you were the only one really that was sort of saying, careful. Anyway, watch that part. But with me in the studio, I have two esteemed guests. I have Sean Woolley, the managing director of Cloud9 Spain and co-author of Home Truth, the book, get it at Amazon. And Peter Franke, one of the founders of Franke de la Fuente law firm. So they'll be with me in the studio, but then we'll be dialing in to a whole bunch of other people during the process of this podcast, which will be available on YouTube and Spotify. Right, let's just start with some basic stuff. So Sean, on the ground, quarter one, What was it like?
Okay. Not spectacular. Interestingly, in terms of volume, it's one of our best first quarters ever. In fact, it's second only to 2024, and only then by a very small margin. So you look at the volume of deals that we've done and think, ooh, great. But then if you look at the average sale value, it's down by about 20% on last year and the year before. So last year and the year before, it was a pretty consistent €1 million average spend. Now that's come down a little bit. So it looks like we're doing just as well, if not better than previous years. But actually, in terms of revenue, because the average deal is a little less, we're slightly behind, but not by much.
January.
Yeah.
Good or bad?
January bad.
Because it didn't stop raining, I guess. That's kind of logical. February
Good.
March?
Okay. Interestingly, you mentioned January because previous Januaries in the last few years have been pretty good. And I think this is
they've been surprisingly good. Unusually good.
Because I've been here 25 years and the months of August and January and even December sometimes were traditionally slow. Which kind of makes sense when you think about business on a global basis. You know, people go on holiday in August, they don't really make decisions. And December, January normally counts as 1 month by the time you've got people coming back from holiday and getting out of Christmas mode. But recently, it didn't seem to matter. We were racing through, having great Augusts, great summers, great Januaries, great Decembers. Last August, we noticed for the first time in a long time that August just went a bit... But that was a normalizing market. I think I covered it on an LPA podcast, and a few people said the same thing. You know, it was just like but that was a normal August. It just wasn't normal compared to what we've had the last few years. And the same thing happened in January. I felt it was just a little bit quiet, but to be expected in a normal market.
I mean, I looked at the notary figures were available for January since then.
I'm completely wrong.
No. In fact, Spain, regionally, provincially, locally, they were down. Transaction volumes were down both year on year, and it was a quiet month everywhere. Looking at the transaction volumes for each town on the Costa del Sol over a 12-month period for each month, I mean, the graph just shows August was terrible, January was terrible.
Oh, really? Okay.
And January was very equivalent to August in most cases when you look at the graph.
I'm glad it's not just me, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, from the law firm's point of view, obviously you guys see the real action from multiple agencies.
Yes.
For quarter one, how's it been? Same as Sean, or?
Similar to what Sean has said now. At January, slow. February also, but picking up slightly. And then March for us now, we feel that the momentum is coming back. And it's interesting what you said, Sean, because I think sometimes we tend to forget what really matters to the market and the data. We sometimes focus a little bit too much on the golden visa is being abolished, limitations of the rental license, and of course the unstable situation in parts of the world and so on. But sometimes it's just the weather.
Oh,
Right.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. When you strip it
tend
back.
to buy properties on Costa del Sol because of the lifestyle, yes, but it's mainly the weather, I would say, and climate. Well, at least it's a very big part of it. So when we have this unusual rainfall, which we had, which is very unusual for the area, of course, it's going to affect transactions because the buyers, they choose to push their trips forward. I don't think that they are... it's not that they are not buying; they're just delaying their trips down.
Yeah, we've had a number of clients who've postponed and said, look, we don't really want to look at €5 million villas in the rain, so we'll come back in April.
I mean, you get to travel to the coast to do some viewings. You at least want to enjoy the trip.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. And we've actually suggested to clients, let's not do this. Let's not do these viewings today, which is kind of counterintuitive for us, for salespeople. But there's no point.
I also have sort of the same data as Sean mentioned here about it's the same favorite, nationalities as always, at least for the last few years. But I have seen more immigration requests. So we have seen more clients, and they enter. The first question is nothing really about the conveyancing process or maybe even a tax question. It's an immigration request first. Then we enter into the possible purchase, property purchase consultation together with tax, etc. That I've seen definitely a lot more requests coming in the last 3 months, and it's been gaining even more momentum the last few weeks only.
Is there any relevance from the whole thing in the Middle East?
Yes, Middle East and America as well, and from the US, from UK also. So, I mean, this maybe it's just another signal of the relocation trend to our parts, that people are they want to know, is it possible for me as a non-European to build me a life in southern Spain, and how do I do it?
I think there is recognition that this bubble that we live in, the Costa del Sol, is a safe haven for many reasons. And a lot of people want that safety net. A lot of people are exposed in the Middle East. A lot of people are exposed in Eastern Europe. Maybe not involved, but exposed. And a lot of people in the States are not happy about politics and, the US possibly becoming a rogue state. So there's a lot of people thinking about moving somewhere, and where can you move to that's international, cosmopolitan, that offers all the things that this lifestyle offers.
I did a survey of agents through LinkedIn and Instagram. I had 137 responses, so it's something. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by the results. So this is Costa del Sol. The question was, how is the Costa del Sol in Q1 2026 compared to 2025? Better, worse, the same? Pretty straightforward question. 45% said better. So 45% said Q1 this year is better than last year. 21% said the same, and only 34% said worse.
But it's pretty split.
It is very split, because if you put the same, you could put that on either side, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could read it as 66% said it was better or the same, or you could say 55% said it was the same or worse.
But it's quite a split vote there, which makes me wonder, what are some agents doing to make them feel positive, and what are some agents doing to make them feel negative, or what are they not doing?
Yeah.
Really interesting. I'd love to get those 137 in and interview them.
Yeah, line them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have got a few people lined up. So zooming out a bit, let's take a look at what Eugenio Oliden, the commercial director at Kyero, had to say about Q1, see if it matches what we see on the ground here. So this is what Eugenio had to say.
Well, hi guys, how are you? I think we have a pretty interesting picture to look at. So in terms of traffic, Q1 2026 versus Q4 2025, we can see US traffic increased by 53% roughly. Ukraine traffic increased by 47% roughly. And UAE traffic increased by 35%. Not only that, but Q1 2025 versus Q1 2026, when comparing those this period, we can see 110% increase from US traffic. Surprising, or maybe not to many of us. In terms of property searches, searches for plots of lands in Costa del Sol have increased by 23%. It is important because this shows an uptrend, obviously, although they still represent a small percentage from our total searches, roughly around 6-7%. In terms of communication channels, last but not least, WhatsApp Q1 2026 versus Q4 2025, the use of WhatsApp has increased by 23%. So it seems that it's gaining each time more and more territory within our three communication channels, which are inquiry forms, telephone calls, and WhatsApp leads. So also something important to look at.
Then I've also got, let's find out, obviously, what are the major markets here other than the Brits, which you have a good sense for, the Belgians and particularly the Dutch, who are the emerging market last year, certainly over the last 12 months. So I've reached out to Marleen, who's the owner of Azul Properties, who's a specialist in Belgian and Dutch buyers. So Marleen, how's it been for Q1 for the Dutch and the Belgian markets?
Hello, Alfredo. This is Marleen from Azul for the Dutch and the Belgian buyers. How did we do in the first quarter of 26? Well, more or less the same as 25. It started off slow in January and February, but we made up for it in March. Now we see that the demands are slowing down. The lead prices go up. We're paying double now to get a lead in. We think, no surprise there, that the conflict in the Middle East is the cause. That doesn't mean that there is no money anymore in the world, but people do not want to spend it. My expectation is that when things slow down, that the demand will come back. And as always, smart buyers buy when other buyers stay at home. Talk to you next quarter.
Interesting.
So that's for the Dutch and the Belgian market. The other big market here is the Polish market. So for that, I am going to speak to Agnes from Agnes Inversiones.
Wow.
Agnes, how has the Polish market been in Q1? Tell us.
Hi, Alfredo. It's Agnes from Agnes Inversiones. Polish market first quarter was relatively quiet, probably partly due to the weather on the Costa del Sol. We were lucky so much with the weather. Activity has recently picked up, so it's still not comparable to the levels of 2025. So we are still awaiting for stronger momentum. We are noticing a shift in clients' preferences. There are now growing interest in local assets, such as commercial properties and even hotels. So it's something new. Over the last 2 weeks as well, we've noticed interest from Polish investors in Dubai, which are now looking into Spain on the Costa del Sol properties. So it's interesting. Let's see how it will be the second quarter, but I think it will be positive.
The interesting thing she said about they're getting inquiries, this is something I've been thinking about, inquiries that people that maybe were thinking of investing or buying in Dubai that are buying here instead, or inquiring here instead at least. The story to do with Dubai, the Middle East, let's talk about that. The Jimmy Widen, who has 3SA here in Marbella, also has 3SA in Dubai. So I thought, who better to ask than Jimmy what's his view is on all this and how it might benefit, because obviously it's natural for us to think, well, if they're compared, then are we going to be seeing lots of inquiries for purchases or not?
Mm-hmm.
I know that Mary Dunn from MP Dunhamptons International, they published something the other day saying they've had a flood of inquiries from the Middle East, from the UAE especially. I would assume that the reason she's seen that big influx, and maybe not everybody else has, is because Hamptons International have offices there, they have a strong presence there. So normally where you see things appear first as a demand indicator. But this is what Jimmy has to say. Let's have a look at it. Jimmy, what can you tell us about what's happening in Dubai, and how will we benefit, if at all, from it in Marbella? And what do you have to say about that, man?
Thank you for the question, Alfredo. And I'm going to try to help out when it comes to Marbella and Dubai and the definition between these two and what's going on right now. So first of all, Dubai and Marbella has nothing in common except the sun and the life quality in many sense. But other than that, it's a big city and a small town. What we see right now is a Dubai market that doesn't have any 260,000 arrivals per day. It's basically down to zero. So obviously the property market is more or less without activity right now. That doesn't mean that any seller so far wants to sell in distressed situations. But what we see in Marbella is that a lot of people living in Dubai from various nationalities, they want to come here and rent at the moment. But I don't think that anyone of these people will rent here and then consider to move here permanently, because it's so many circumstances, and especially the taxes, that is a huge difference between Marbella and Dubai. So these markets are not to compare with each other, but we will obviously see a huge increase of people from Dubai being in Marbella during this summer, and they will stay for as long time as they feel like, and the traffic, the restaurants, everything in Marbella will get a big boost of this. But I'm quite convinced that the Dubai market, quicker than people think, from September, October, maybe November, will start to pick up again. And hopefully, as a real estate agent, it's possible to do some very good deals after summer. But until then, I don't really think we will see any enormous opportunities, because people are basically waiting to see what's going to happen.
Thanks, Jimmy. So that's an interesting insight, isn't it? And the rental thing is something I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard that the inquiries people are getting, the people that I know at least, is more to do with rentals. There's a bit of a scramble for rentals. I've heard through one source and also directly from another, from a school. Two of the schools have reported getting a massive influx of people just in a hurry trying to find a school place for their kids, expats from the Middle East area. And they're struggling to find places for them, struggling to find rentals for them. So that definitely, I think, is safe to say is happening. It's kind of corroborated by what Jimmy is saying. Then I've also asked the CEO of James Edition, Eric Finnas Dahlstrom, a fellow Swede. Peter, I think you both met him.
Yeah.
They being an international luxury portal, they see a lot of the sort of trends zoomed out from a high net worth sort of point perspective, and they have presences all over the world, including the Middle East, Marbella, and the States. Hi, Eric, what can you tell me from James Edition's perspective?
Alfredo, thanks a lot for having me. Well, very briefly, perhaps first touching on the Dubai situation. I think there we see that natural demand is slowing down, but I would say it's a little bit of a wait and see. A lot of the transactions now, or the share of off plan, is increasing quite a lot in the market. So we still see transactions, even if it's lower than February. So March and April is slowing down. We still see a lot of interest on the demand side, and we see transactions coming through. We see transactions coming through on the whole spectrum of the price range. So from entry level up to trophy, ultra luxury properties. I would say ultra luxury actually holds up quite well. But we see a lot of transactions then mainly happening in the off-plan segment. So I would guess that actually indicates that people are still betting out on Dubai for long term, but naturally harder to transact secondary stock right now. And I would assume, if we compare with COVID, that we have a little bit of a pent-up demand situation, that if and when this conflict calms down, we will actually see a lot of those transactions that were supposed to happen now actually get accelerated in the coming period. So we also have Ramadan also recently happening. So that of course distorts, makes it harder to isolate the effect of the conflict. If we move over to Marbella and neighboring towns of Benavis and Estepona, I would say that there we see, of course, that number of transactions went down a little bit last year compared to previous year. And going into 2026 now, if we look at demand on the site as a leading indicator, it seems to pick up quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's kept correlated much with Dubai, because it started happening before. However, it's very different picture depending on where you look. So high volume localities such as Andalucía, we see very limited price growth and fairly stable transaction volume. So I would say that perhaps in some regions we're reaching kind of a level where either the stock coming to the market doesn't really transact due to too high price expectations, and we're probably on average looking like a 15 to 20% discount from list price to transaction price, even higher in the higher price ranges of 25% or so. But we see very, very high price growth then in other like localities around Marbella. So if we look down towards Cancelada, El Paraíso, towards Estepona, New Golden Mile, if we look at San Pedro, very, very strong price growth. Also, a lot of new supply coming to the market in many of these places. You actually have constructions happening as you don't really have to the same extent in for example, Andalucía. So I think looking into 2026, I think the demand will for sure be high if the Dubai situation continues to longer than expected. I would say that what now is rental demand from there in Marbella will transition into purchase demand, and kind of the volumes that we're seeing in Dubai are of course massive compared to the Marbella market. So if that would transform into purchases, that would be a demand driver for sure in Marbella this year.
What are your thoughts?
Interesting. A few things I've picked out of that is Jimmy said that there's no buyers in Dubai at the moment, which is interesting, and that just says that the market is just dead. There's no one buying, there's no one selling because no one's buying. We've actually lost deals. I know that there's opportunities here for people to kind of refocus and move from the Middle East to Marbella or to invest here, but we've actually lost deals from people who are exposed to property and investment in the Middle East who were just scared, or maybe not scared, but just nervous about what's ahead. So they're not doing anything because their money's tied up in a war zone effectively. So they don't want to commit to doing something in Marbella, even though they probably wish they could, because they're worried about their asset base in the Middle East. So yes, there are opportunities for agents in Marbella, but there's also, it's not as rosy as you might think. It depends on the client and how they're exposed to the Middle East already. And a lot of them are bought there for investment or lifestyle. I think it is a wait and see. I think people generally have short memories. So in a year or so's time, will we have forgotten about the war? Will we be thinking about no tax, sunshine all year? I don't know, because I think it very much depends on what one person in the world decides to do. And we all know who that is.
I think the thing to compare against COVID, because both, I think, well, at least one of them mentioned COVID, the pent-up demand element. I think there is a difference. During COVID, there was time to pent-up demand for Marbella, because what was happening in the world made you want what Marbella has to offer more. In the case of what's happening there, it's happening there.
Yeah.
Right? It could make you question, is that where I want to go long term?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more nationality. I reached out to Anne Ramsay about the Finnish buyers. I just thought for something completely different, a bit of a curveball, see what Q1 was. Anne Ramsay just set up her own agency called Ramsay Atelier. He was a TV star, like on a sort of a real estate TV thing in Finland. So she was a big hit there. She came here a couple of years ago to open up the branch of Bo Homes, which is a big agency over in Finland. And what can you tell us about the Finnish buyers in Q1?
Hello, Alfredo. Thank you so much for asking. The Finnish market is doing great here in Costa del Sol. Q1 was very busy, a lot of active Finnish buyers. And what I think is very interesting is that there is an increasing amount of Finnish investors arriving to Costa del Sol as well. I get a lot of requests for plots, apartments to renovate, and of course, interesting new build projects. So Finnish investors, they are active now. I do think, though, that Q2 will be a little bit more calm, unfortunately, because as we're leaning towards summer, the Finnish buyers are definitely going back, I would say, at least in June. I think April and May, we still have a very good momentum, but unfortunately, June, it might be a little bit more calm for the Finnish buyers. But I hope I'm wrong.
So there you go. That's we heard of Moomin. I learned something. Peter the Franke Franke did the country files thing, all deep dive on Finnish buyers, and I learned something. Yeah.
Joke.
No, it's a
No,
it's
it's
a
not a
Finnish.
joke. It's a book. It's Moomin Dawn. And should we deep dive?
We
into
should
that
deep
topic?
dive into it. Then let's get away from Dubai.
You don't know the.
What are you talking about, you lot? Honestly.
It's a kid's book. Kids book.
It's
Oh,
an internationally known kid
Finnish.
that is
Beautiful.
Finland.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
You read it yourself.
Hmm?
You read it yourself.
I have and I read it for my kids. Everyone has read it in Sweden and Finland.
Really?
I think, yeah.
so the part of Los Pacos where all the Finnish are,
Yeah.
where there's a Finnish concentration, is known as Moomin Valley. They brought that up in the country files, and I thought, hey, what's that all about? So I googled it, and they then explained it. Needless to say, we need to touch on mortgage rates. For that, who else better than Marc Elliott de Lama, the owner of Fluent Finance Abroad? Marc, what can you tell us about Q1 as far as Spanish mortgages go?
At Fluent Finance Abroad, we've started off pretty well. The outlook for the Spanish mortgage market and the Spanish property market is pretty good. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on interest rates because, as we've seen with the troubles in the Middle East, interest rates have gone up. But just to give you an idea, that the 2nd of February Euribor rate, the 12-month Euribor rate, was at 2.29, so 2.23, and today it's gone down a little bit because of the kind of a ceasefire. It's at 2.767. So yeah, we've seen a 0.6 jump in the last month and a half, and that obviously is making people a little bit nervous, but it seems like the ball is being kept on the deck for the time being. But we do need to be conscious that interest rates are creeping up, and we don't really know how far they will go. Hopefully they will maintain where they're at, because where they're at the moment is kind of healthy. Now, just to give you a bit of perspective, the 2nd of January 2024, which was also a very good year for mortgages, Euribor, 12-month Euribor was at 3.532. So we're well below that. So yeah, there's a little bit of panic setting in, or a bit of nervousness, but we're a long way away from where we were in January 2024, which is a good thing, and that builds, hopefully, should maintain confidence within the Spanish mortgage market, I hope.
Okay, so let's see what a developer has to say. I'm speaking to. Okay, so we have
Alfredo, have you got any sleep this week?
some. Let's find out what the developer has to say. Got Marc Pritchard, who is the sales and marketing director of Taylor Wimpey España. Hi, Marc. What can you tell us about Q1 from Taylor Wimpey's point of view?
First of all, hi, Alfredo. Right, Q1 has been, if we look all over Spain, has been slightly more challenging than we anticipated. Normally, looking at a builder's or house builder's point of view, we have a lot of sites which we did expect to come on stream, and we would have started building in the first quarter of 2026, which haven't come for various reasons. Administration, we haven't got the building license. Once we've got the building license, everything took longer, renegotiating building prices. There's a lot of pressure where we're seeing a lot of headwinds coming up. So it's still good. We're still selling. We would have loved to sell a little bit more. But overall, it's okay, having in mind that we should have had more sales outlets. So we're having less sales outlets, and having less sales outlets automatically means that your sales rhythm will drop slightly. So we have a lot of sites coming on stream now on the Costa del Sol, on the Costa Blanca, and on Mallorca, but all of them with delays. Some of them delayed 3 months, some of them 6 months, and some of them were still waiting for the building licenses. What's going to happen in Q2? Now, with all these new sites coming for us, we do expect that there will be a pickup. Q2 is normally the most important of the year. April, May until the mid of June is always very, very important time for us. It is the main sales season, so it's important that we get these new projects for us in the 3 regions we operate in, that we get them online, that we'll have sales people there, that we get the agents working, and they actually come around and visit us. if we look at the whole of Spain, yeah, we've got the typical nationalities. Obviously, we've still got the Costa del Sol. We still have the British being very strong, especially inquiries. In visits, not so much. But the inquiries are certainly there. The Dutch market is certainly gone a lot better, especially over the last 2 years already. But the Dutch market is one of the strong markets, especially down the Costa del Sol. Another market which has increased quite strongly, again, specifically on the Costa del Sol and even more on the Costa Blanca, is the Spanish second home market. That's something we've seen, which is actually, if you look year to date, first quarter, our strongest market in terms of visits and actually sales, new reservations. Polish is still there. We have seen a slight drop in Belgium's. But yeah, the main markets for us, if we look at the Costa del Sol specifically, is probably Dutch, British, Polish, Spanish, and German. Those would be the main nationalities for us. That's inquiries, and then if we look at visits, it would be Dutch, British, Spanish, and Polish market.
Thanks, Marc. That's super helpful. So what are your thoughts on that? Anything to report from there?
I picked up on the challenges that they're having. Not only bureaucracy and waiting for licenses, but also he mentioned renegotiating building prices. And we're seeing this as well. We have a couple of villa projects that we're marketing, and we're having to pull them off the market because the prices no longer apply, because building prices have gone up like 15% in some cases. So I can see that being a pain for a company like Taylor Wimpey. I mean, we also have a furniture business, and we noticed that suppliers are starting to add things onto invoices like fuel. You're like, well, yeah, isn't that part of the transport that you already charge us for? No, it's an extra fuel charge because of what's happening in the Middle East. Okay, but a price has gone up for you. Well, not yet, but they might do. And hang on, but you're charging us like a stupid little amount. But why? Anyway, so I think there's pain to come with inflationary forces because of what's happening in the Middle East. But building prices have gone up. Interestingly, I think, again, it's a sign of a normalized market that, as an agent, we're used to receiving a commission from a developer. That's how it works. Like we get a commission from a vendor, we get a commission from a developer. And developers in the last 12 months have started to, some of them, increase their commissions and offer little bonuses, which they don't have to do. So the reason they're doing it is because sales have slowed down a little bit. I'm not saying any of them are in trouble, but they don't.
It's a sign.
If they don't have to do something, they don't do it, do they? Let's be honest with you.
Similar signs that we saw for COVID also, when they were offering subject to viewing for 2 months' time,
which actually made sense at the time.
At the
because
time,
it was the only way we get a client.
But I think it's just a sign that they are adapting to either a current situation or what they expect to happen. I think one main trend that I can notice from all these comments here, or basically the trend that I have seen, I think many have seen since COVID, is that the market here is very strong. The underlying market, real estate market in Costa del Sol is strong. Then we have macro, micro events, circumstances globally, nationally, that's going to affect that maybe short term.
Yeah.
We have also maybe a little bit of overvaluation of properties in certain areas. Somebody here mentioned Nueva Andalucía, for example. That is now, we don't see those massive price increases there, which maybe is a good thing at the moment. And other areas are instead then gaining momentum. But all these factors now, I think it's only or merely affecting an underlying very, very strong market. And I can see, even though with this terrible situation that we have in the Middle East with the war, we have, as Sean mentioned here, what's going on in the US, with the leadership over there, what's going to happen? It's an insecurity for everyone. We have still war in Europe, and we have other factors that's also going to impact the Spanish real estate market where we live. But there are also developments. You can see developments throughout this year, which can have a huge positive impact on the Spanish real estate market also. I mean, for decades, we've had a closed Iran, for example. Now, suddenly, leadership might change. I mean, we don't know, right? We are not political experts. but it could happen also something for the better. Then suddenly we have a huge market of Iran, because I think both me and Sean knows that we have a lot of inquiries from people either actually from Iran or from Irani citizens, right, or heritage, that are interested in this market. But of course, for obvious reasons, they can't transfer the money. And also I agree actually with Sean about the situation in the Emirates, that it's too early to make any conclusions or analyze the situation properly, because we're talking about such strong emotions with people, fear, and they want to move their family somewhere. You talk about families and their personal situation has nothing. When that becomes such a big factor, taxes, prices, etc., means less perhaps. So there's also, we can have a big influx of relocators from Emirates to Spain also. So that could and just build on an already underlying very, very strong market. So I think it's only positives really, if you want to be a little bit selfish and talk about this our market for this year.
Yeah, I mean,
if the weather stays.
Yeah, with this stuff, right?
Because without the sunshine, we'd be a bit lost. Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing to point out, which is should be needless to say, but I'll say it anyway. And this is a real estate conversation. There's nothing to do. Obviously, any bad stuff happening anywhere in the world is awful. Our conversation is purely from a market point of view, not from an emotional or humanitarian point of view.
So what Marc was saying was very interesting about the buyer demographic, and this is what we wrote about in our book, wasn't it? That not only have you got these micro markets within the Costa del Sol in terms of areas, but you've also got these micro markets of buyers, coming from all over the world, all with different perceptions and buying patterns and thought processes. Interesting to me was the surge in the Spanish second home market. That was very interesting. We've noticed that a lot more inquiries from native Spanish, and also the German market. He just mentioned it at the end, and he didn't say it was growing, but he mentioned the Germans, and we've noticed again more Germans. And the Germans have they've come in waves and then gone elsewhere. Like Mallorca, I know they're dominant, and here they've always been a little bit reticent recently, and now they seem to be coming back into focus. And I do think that the US market, I know we've just touched on it, the US market is one to continue watching, purely because of the amount of people.
Yeah, enormous market.
Just that the head count and the buying power of the North American market has to be the most significant opportunity. I know we've discussed this, how we tap into that, or how the tourist board of the Costa del Sol taps into that, and where you start with a place as vast as the US and Canada, I've no idea. But we've noticed a lot of inquiries from the US particularly have Spanish sounding surnames. So there's already a heritage link there, which makes them feel very comfortable with buying in Europe, and particularly in Spain. And I think a lot of Americans are certainly, look, the Americans that we speak to, which of course is biased because they're the people that are looking to get out, but the ones that we do speak to are not impressed with what's happening there at the moment. And I'm not saying everybody is not impressed. Of course, there are a lot of people supportive of the system there at the moment, but just watch this space on that one.
Yeah.
So let's just cover a few pieces of perhaps news in inverted commas covering the sector. So one of them to do with this autonomous earning under 85 grand a year, being able to step out of the IVA system. So IVA exempt or something like that. So they wouldn't be charging IVA, they wouldn't be adding it to invoices or using it for the discounts. That hit a lot of news. There's a lot of autonomous independent estate agents. There's already been talk about, they could use that to try and get listings, because essentially they'd be offering a 21% discount to a seller who obviously doesn't get to reclaim the IVA that they've forked out for the thing. What can you tell us about this piece of news, Peter?
That it's not the Spanish legislation yet. It's always point number one, right, when we talk about news. That's quite a good thing to point out. I think the most dramatic similar news that we had last year was the 100% tax from the government, and of course which spread like a wildfire everywhere, but of course here in our market, which wasn't also Spanish legislation. It was just an announcement from Prime Minister. In this case, it's a EU directive that gives the member states the right to implement this VAT legislation. Yes, so Spain are allowed to do this now. They have the mandate, but they have to adopt it into Spanish law, and there's no announcements whatsoever that that's going to be done. So that's watch this space.
Yeah.
Kind of
So
information.
so the message is, if you are hearing about this EVA exempt thing for autonomous, there's nothing happening just yet. So just chill out.
Yeah.
Well, what about the 100% taxing? Is there any news on that?
No.
Okay, that's even a better answer. And there was one piece of news that I picked up on, which is a change in transfer taxes.
Yes.
What was that about?
That one is relevant.
Okay.
I would say it's highly relevant for our market. Investor companies could, and they still can, but they could benefit a lot of creating a Spanish SL company and make their flip and sell investments through a Spanish company. And if they would resell, and if they fulfill the requirements for that tax regime, which are, they can't buy the property, of course, to use it for the shareholders, etc. It's mainly for an investment product. Basically, they make a project out of the property and they resell it within 5 years. Then, according to the old regulations, then they could, instead of 7% transfer tax, they paid only 2%. So 5% matters definitely for investors. That's changed. So they have put limitations on that tax regime. First of all, on the price. So before this new regulation, the price wasn't a factor for being to qualify for the tax regime. Now it is. So there are only properties for 500,000 and less that qualify. So if you're an investor, you want to make a flip and sell, you have to buy for 500,000 and less. So anything above that, you can't buy with 2%. It's going to be 7%. And they have also changed the time, which is important. So you have to flip and sell within 2 years rather than the 5 years that it was previously. So those 2 points are important to keep in mind for anyone watching.
And is there, did I read correctly, there's a change to wealth taxes? Was that?
Well, yes, and well. It's a change in the cap on individuals, on non-residents, in terms of the wealth tax. So I'll try to explain this. We have we have the regional wealth tax, which we had here in Andalucía, but not anymore. They abolished it a number of years ago. But what the government then did was to introduce a new wealth tax.
The solidarity.
The solidarity tax.
Right.
It's a great name, isn't it?
Lovely. Solidarity.
Exactly.
Help a brother out.
And for residents in Spain, they benefited from a cap. So if you had to pay the solidarity tax, they had a 60% cap on the income, meaning that you weren't obligated to pay tax for more than 60% of your income, because you can have a big fortune, you can have a very valuable asset, one real estate asset, for example, but maybe your income can't compare to that asset, right? So they put a 60% cap on, but that didn't apply to non-residents, but now it does. And so that's a good thing.
So is it just leveling it up?
Yeah. Well, this is another exception, and this is from the courts. We should remember that this is not a new legislation. This is how the courts have viewed, because a discriminatory application, it was challenged.
Yeah.
And this is another one, because we saw last year how also the courts redefined the deductions of costs for rentals on non-European property owners in Spain. So it's always good to point out for people that the government can do things, they can legislate, regional governments can also legislate, but in the end, we also have the courts, and they will judge if legislations are in some way discriminatory or that they don't hold up. And that's what they've done in this case.
Okay, so talking about courts, the big story that I've been holding back
Why
to
are they
the
looking at
end.
me when he mentioned courts?
You used to be, both of you have these
Yeah.
lawyers, right? But before I do, the Costa del Sol, we like to include our friends over at Sotogrande. Let me just quickly do a quick check in Sotogrande to see, just in case there's something major happening over there. So for that, I'm going to reach out to Charlie Gubbins from Noll Sotogrande
Lovely.
to see what is that, if anything's happening there. So Charlie, what's happening quarter one, just before we leave? What's happening? Anything to tell us about Sotogrande in quarter one?
Hi, Alfredo. Thank you for your question. Q1 has been relatively okay, a slow start. I think everyone had that with the weather and people getting on later. But people looking here in Sotogrande, typically family orientated. The school has done, attracting people. We got climate security. We have obviously the lifestyle of golf and polo and all of that. But from a nationality point of view, we've had Romanians, we've had British, Germans, Swiss. We have a French client. We have an Italian at the moment. We have a Dane, Spanish, obviously, one or two, Polish and French. So a variety of different clients from different nationalities. And, we made 3 nice sales and the pipeline is looking okay. So not too bad for the start of Q1. Maybe a little bit slower than last year, but still, after a very slow start, happy with what we got.
So there you go. Nothing much different. The similar story to what's happened here, right? Slow
It's
start.
interesting because I always count the Sotogrande in the Costa del Sol mix, although it's in a different province.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's lower footfall in Sotogrande, so you can't look at the numbers in the same way.
You can't really look at percentages, or can you? Because 10 houses more could
skew the whole thing. But I think Sotogrande is on the up generally, because I think people are looking for that more chilled out, more space and air and sort of space to breathe, really. I think that's always going to be the case. So I can see a bright future for Sotogrande.
For the next quarterly review, I'm going to include somebody from Malaga, just so that we can always offer Costa del Sol core, centered around Marbella, and then sort of Sotogrande and Malaga. I think between the 3 of them, they offer complementary but different things.
For sure.
So the big story, and this takes me back to your update about the legal stuff, is to do with the agent registration. So in January, the law passed to the Junta had 2 years to implement a compulsory agent registration, and everything was looking rosy. And the latest is that the central government saying, "Oh no, you don't." They're saying this compulsory business is unconstitutional. Okay, it's similar to what's happened in the Balearics, but let's find out from Álvaro, who has been trying to figure out everything. Álvaro, the president of the LPA. Álvaro, what can you tell us about this new development?
Well, yes, as we were speaking in the last 4 or 5 months about the new law that was coming in from all the register that have to be a mandatory, we found the same. Well, now we found the same problem that we had in Baleares, and it is that the government, the Spanish government from Madrid, said that the mandatory it is not possible to do because it's unconstitutional. So as I sent to you yesterday, you can maybe check now with you check already with the college, all the document and all the things that reflect this problem. Of course, it is not something like done. So we have now some time to fight against that. So we already was speaking in this Andalucía table that we are going now to do the federation here in Andalucía. And we are going to fight with that, of course, to try to be mandatory. But what we know now, it will not be a mandatory.
So that's a blow, isn't it?
What does it mean? I mean, what does that really mean?
It means,
in terms of day-to-day?
It's huge. It's huge. If you remove the obligatory nature of an agent registration thing, it becomes a badge like being part of the LPA or something else. It's a voluntary thing, which doesn't regulate the market, which means that the cowboys can still be cowboys and they have to not be part of it.
Yes, but that's already the case in many other countries. But the culture and the tradition of those real estate markets, for example, in the UK as well, they have, built an own industry ethics, so to speak, or an own structure for how they want to conduct their business in those countries. So my spontaneous thought when I heard this now is that we should definitely just continue with the steps that we are taking. I know that the LPA is doing a really good job. There are other associations also working hard because it's absolutely needed for this market and it's needed for the clients. If it cannot be done through legislation, we can still raise the bar through, aligning ourselves together in this kind of networks and in associations, even though they are not mandatory. But if you're part of it, it's because you have been approved and you fulfill certain requirements, and that can bring some kind of security, to clients. That's my immediate thought about this.
Does that mean that the likes of the LPA and Wimpey and people like that, associations like that, do they become more important? Because I've been saying for a couple of years now that if you're a buyer, why would you buy with an agency that isn't a member of one of these governing bodies kind of thing? Because like Peter said, you're just adding a layer of security and protection to your purchase by using someone that is regulated to a certain degree, even if it's just internal regulation.
But my view, to just counter what both of you just said, which makes perfect sense, my view is that buyers do not, broadly speaking, I'll only buy with an LPA agent.
I don't think buyers
or Wimpey. I don't think they know about it. You know why? Because the market send of these associations to the broader market hasn't been good. Let's just call it what it is. So a typical buyer doesn't go, are you a member of Wimpey or a member of LPA or a member of Rappi? They don't. So until they do that, it's kind of a little something that the agents members are.
If the market's still not mature in one sense here, and what I mean by that is that if I buy, 10 years ago, if I was buying a property in Sweden, I know about the market. I know exactly how it works. I have the knowledge about my own home market. I would think that most people do in their home countries, right? And they have already a sense, well, of course, I'm going to work with somebody that's part of an association. Here, people come in with much less, of course, knowledge. They are gaining more knowledge now through different ChatGPT kind of sources, etc., for good and bad. But they are definitely not aware of this at all. I mean, LPA, etc. I guess it's not a non-question for many of the international buyers. They don't know about this.
The client
that doesn't still. I think it still just strengthens my personal belief, that we just have to continue, because that needs to be a long-term goal to organize ourselves in best interest of the clients.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it's not a definite no. They've opened a period of consultation. So the what you have is the FI, which is the National Association of Agents Associations. They're setting up an Andalucía one specifically, so that the different agents associations can kind of band together and kind of lobby as one united front. Álvaro explained a little bit what they're doing about that. So Álvaro, what can you tell us about this new thing?
Well, the last week we were in Seville. We had a meeting with all the association of real estate agents here in Andalucía from different cities. And we decided for the next 11th of May, we will go to sign the Federation of Association of Real Estate here in Andalucía, with the idea to fight or to try to collaborate with La Junta de Andalucía to define all the protests, the law, the system of how we will control this, the register and everything. So I hope of the 11th of May we have more news about that.
Sean, any views on this?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think that if regulation doesn't come down the track soon, then I think the likes of the LPA and Wimpey will need to speak to their members and decide if they want to market the fact that they are the only layer of protection to the general public is a thing that they want to do, and how do they allocate a budget for it? Because that's going to be the next step, isn't it? Like you said, that there's a lack of it because no one knows who LPA.
Well, the LPA members tell the LPA customers that the LPA is a thing and they should deal with them, but they're already dealing with them. Yeah. So the question is, how do you get the rest of the leads that come in from other thing? Where's the information? So it needs more information.
It does.
So that's it, guys. That's it for this quarterly review. And as a final thing, I'm going to do something that might have saved us sat around here for an hour and a hell of a lot of work. Let's see what ChatGPT thinks about the market. can you provide a Costa del Sol real estate market update as of for Q1 2026?
The Costa del Sol real estate market remains strong in the first quarter of 2026, with annual price growth of about 10 to 13%. In prime areas like Marbella and the Golden Triangle, average values now exceed €5,400 per square meter. Demand is still led by international buyers, especially from the UK and the US, while supply is constrained, particularly for luxury new builds. Overall growth is expected to moderate to around 5 to 9% in 2026.
Thank you. Well, I would have said there's a lot of work on that.
It's interesting, isn't it?
So that's it for today. Just before we go, Sean and Peter, any short, bite-size outlooks for Q2?
I think, like anything, we are influenced and governed by headwinds and tailwinds, and sometimes we don't know what's coming down the track at us. Like, who would have thought? I think Q2 is going to be strong, probably a little bit stronger than Q1. Traditionally, it always is. I think we've got a good pipeline of leads coming in. Our lead flow is decent from all over the world, and it's still, the sun is shining now, which also makes a difference. And I think that, again, it just puts people in a better frame of mind, I think, for making buying decisions.
Peter?
I think it will be strong. If we have to make predictions, my prediction is that it will be strong Q2 this year. And it's based a little bit what I mentioned before about the underlying strong market. If that's where I'm at. I've been for years now here. That's a fact and we can see that clearly from numbers also. So
the fundamentals are all in place.
Yeah,
they haven't changed. It's the external factors that are influencing it, but the fundamentals are absolutely there.
So without any further analysis, I just say strong.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you both very much for joining me and everybody else for helping in this. And so the next one will be similar format, but better.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.